So how do you make yourself uncomfortable enough to facilitate change? I don't think the challenge is in making yourself uncomfortable, although you can say that discomfort is a good indicator for change. So in my experience, the process of change itself is uncomfortable and is like hard, right? So like, I'll give you guys an example. So what I was telling Krusif, I think the challenge, like, it's kind of weird that when he starts to make progress, he starts to feel depressed and suicidal. Like, what is up with that, right? Like, how does that work? And and I'm sorry, guys, but that's just how our mind works. Our mind prefers the comfortable to the good. This is important to understand. Your mind prefers that which you know to that which is good. So if you think about why are people in abusive relationships, like, people who get into abusive relationships oftentimes get into another abusive relationship. They have strings of abusive relationships. And it's because it's something that they're familiar with. It's comfortable. Even if it's painful, it's comfortable. And so for Krusif, he knows he can withstand the pain that he inflicts upon himself if he doesn't do anything. Like, he knows he can withstand that. And he knows he can survive it. Even though it makes him depressed, he can survive it. What he doesn't know is what's going to happen if he gives it his all. What's going to happen if he actually tries? Like, because he has these aspirations, and if he starts working at a call center, he's not moving towards his aspirations. Is working at a call center the same as giving up on his aspirations? That's the challenge he has to face. So, my sense is that you try to change, and then you notice that when you try to make a change, you start to become uncomfortable. Right? That's the issue. Okay, I identify a lot with Krusif's problems. I read and research a lot about diet, but I still fall into the pit of grabbing the comfort foods off the store shelf, even though I try not to keep it in my house. I still go to the drive-thru 2 to 3 times a week, even though I have good food at home and haven't done anything to really earn it. Okay. So I think that this is a problem, once again, of like minute understanding. So when we think about Krusif's situation, Krusif gives us the big picture. And the big picture is, okay, I make progress and then I give up. And then one day I go to work, and I want y'all to just think about this. So he's like, one day I go to work, I do it for a week, and then I just quit. But when did Krusif start to learn something new about himself? When did we make progress? It wasn't looking at day 7. It wasn't looking at the end. It was looking at day 3. It was looking at like what happens to him when he starts to make a change. And then he's like, wait a minute. When I start to make a change, I start to actually like feel more depressed. Like the better I do for myself, the more I feel depressed. And that's not something that he saw because he was looking at the end result. He was looking at the end. Right? It's kind of like saying, it's sort of like, if my house burns down, I can say like, oh, my house burned down. But like, when the house is fully on fire and you're saying like, my house keeps burning down, like, that's not the problem. The problem is like, first of all, where did the fire start? And secondly, like, how did the fire spread? So the question that so this person says, I identify a lot with Krusif's problems. I read and research a lot about diet. Yeah, that's intellectual. I still fall into the pit of grabbing comfort foods off the store shelf, even though I try not to keep it in the house. So the question is like, what happens in that moment, right? The question is, when you go to the grocery store, how are you feeling? How hungry are you? Like, that's where the money is. What mindset are you in when you go to the grocery store? Is it like advertising that suckers you in? Or I still go to the drive-thru 2 to 3 times a week, even though I have good food at home. The question is like, what happens before you're at the drive-thru? Are you at home? And then you're like, I don't want to eat any of this. And then you get up and you go to the drive-thru. Or are you driving home from work and you see it and you're feeling hungry because you skipped lunch that day. And then you kind of like pick something up. Right? That's where the money is. So you've got to like really, and this is what I was saying to Krusif, is you need understanding. Understanding and awareness. Awareness of what is going on inside you. Because what I'm hearing is the end result. I'm not hearing the process. And if you want to make a change in your life, it's not about focusing on the end result. You have to make a change in the process. If you want a different outcome, you need to change your process. There's no process in this question. So that's what you need to look into. Right? Where did the decision to make bad food start? Did it start by skipping lunch? Did it start by skipping dinner? Did it start by working too much? Did it start by not packing your bag? Did it start by not waking up early enough? Where did that start? Did it start because you are in love with someone and they don't text you back? It can start in all kinds of places. Right? So you have to look at where the process starts and how it progresses. That's how you make a change in the end. How can you overcome the ego that arises within? Great question. So the first thing is to recognize what is ego and what is not ego. Right? So as we saw today, like arrogance, what we think of as standard arrogance, like if someone is nice to other people and kind and compassionate, we think of that person as not arrogant, but that person still has ego. And that's because our understanding of the word ego is not as good as like what the yogis understood, right? There's subtle kinds of ego. There are different kinds of ego. Because the first thing that you've got to do is recognize when your ego is active, right? Recognize when you have thoughts of I'm too good for this or I'm better than other people. So here are the clues of ego. Ego pumps yourself up and knocks other people down, and ego makes comparisons. So anytime you make a comparison between two people, that's ego. So the first thing you've got to do is see it arising. So see it arising, and then notice it. And then as you notice it, you begin to get this capacity of saying, oh, that's my ego, I'm not going to do that. Right? But you can't do that if you're on autopilot. Like, you have to notice it and say, like, oh, that's my anxiety. Like, I know you guys have done this, where everyone's done this, where it's like, I don't want to jump in the water, and I'm anxious that I'm going to feel cold, and you acknowledge that you don't want to jump in the water, and then you're like, okay, time to jump into the water. Like, you can separate a part of your mind aside and choose to act independently of it, but you can't do that without the separation. So, you've got to do that. Thank you for the host, Melina. Okay. Do people, I guess okay. So the other thing about ego, let me just do a quick introduction because we have a host. So my name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston, Massachusetts. This is the HealthyGamerGG stream. Our goal is to help people understand themselves better and therefore like make improvements in their lives. So we do interviews. We talk a lot about kind of psychology, spirituality, things like that. And we also, like, I teach meditation on stream because I think that's important. And today we had an interview about sort of someone who felt super stuck in life and felt like they quote unquote suck at life and how they couldn't do anything well. They weigh like 500 pounds and they're not able to lose weight and things like that. And what we kind of tunnel down to is that he's got some interesting patterns of wanting to stay stuck and that he actually has a problem with his ego. So right now we're kind of talking about ego and what that means. So the other thing about ego, this is another cure for ego, is spend time in nature. So you guys have to understand that when ego relies on comparison, right? So like when Krusif was making a statement, he's like, oh yeah, I'm a nobody. Like, that's an ego statement. That's coming from his ego because he's comparing himself to other people. So if you want to get away from comparing yourself to other people, what you need to do is get away from people. So when you spend time in nature, like, that's not going to build ego, that's going to build confidence. And confidence and ego are actually like on a seesaw. So the more confident you are, the less your ego is active. And the more your ego is active, the less confident you are. Because a sense of confidence isn't a sense of self that's based on comparison. It's a sense of self that's based internally. So meditation leads to confidence, like understanding yourself irrespective of other people. Like, go for a hike, or like, go swimming in a lake or the ocean or something like that. And spending time with nature when you're not near other people, like if I go out for a hike and I say I'm going to climb to the top of that boulder and I succeed and there's no one around, like, I can celebrate, but I'm just celebrating for myself. I'm not showing off for anyone. There's no chance for ego. And then if I fail, like, that's also like my failure. That's personal. It's just like, okay, I didn't do it. There's no shame. It's just like I set a target for myself and I didn't do it. It's like success or failure becomes internal. It doesn't become external, because nature doesn't care. Nature doesn't care what you decide to do. Nature's just going to be nature. But other people care, and that sort of engenders ego, and then you start making comparisons and what do people think about you and how do you feel about yourself? And so just spend time away from people, and I personally have benefited a lot from spending time with nature. So when I was like, I started like doing some like hiking and like climbing and stuff like that. Climbed a bunch of mountains in Colorado, climbed Kilimanjaro. Like, I think those are all wonderful experiences. And I think you should spend more time in nature if you want to overcome your ego. Because nature will put your ego in check real quick. How do I get over my fear of establishing a permanent personal identity because I feel like nothing is good enough? Okay. How do I get over my fear of establishing a permanent personal identity because I feel like nothing is good enough? Okay. Problem number one is you don't have a personal permanent identity. Identity is not permanent, right? Identity changes over time. So if we think about like my identity, it was like, I thought I was a super smart kid, right? Like I was a smart kid and like the other kids were stupid. And I got bullied a lot in high school and in middle school and elementary school. So I had my thing, which was like, I was smarter than these kids. So I became a smart kid. And then like in college, like I was afraid of being stupid. So I didn't study, because if I didn't study and I failed a test, then I'm not stupid, I'm just lazy. But heaven forbid I do anything. If I studied for the test and I got a B, that would be friggin' humiliating. So then like my identity became something bad, right? I was like, oh, I'm a smart kid. I'm too good for college. I could get a 4.0 if I wanted to, but I just choose not to, or I'm lazy. That's what my identity became. Then I went to India and it became, oh, I want to become a monk. Because screw this world. There's ego there too. It was like, oh, I can't cut it in the real world, so I'm going to say I'm better than the real world. All these other materialistic noobs, I'm a spiritual expert, and everyone else is a materialistic noob. So I'm going to become a monk. And then I finally noticed my ego, and I was like, well, that's kind of silly. So then I went to medical school, and I became a doctor, and I started helping people. And then I was like a Harvard Andy, right? So I'm a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, and I was like that Andy for a little while. And then now I'm not. Now I'm just like a streamer on Twitch, and I'm just another noob on Twitch, right? It's like, and so your identity, first of all, changes over time. And that if you think nothing is good enough, that too is like ego. Why don't, like, you guys understand, like, you're not good enough. That's what Krusif is too. Krusif is talking about having aspirations that are far above what he's capable of right now. So that's not good enough. So he chooses not to do it. So what you need to do is, first of all, understand that identity is not permanent. And secondly, like, it's not about what's good enough. Like, good enough is always going to be a failure. You just have to do what is. Like, do what you can. Do what you can today. And as long as you do the best job that you can today, you will be amazed at where you end up. And the best job that you did today may not live up to the expectations that you set for yourself because of your ego, which is fine. But you just keep on working today. And then one day, you may feel good enough. Because I know, I mean, it's surprising. People think that once you end up as a physician at the Harvard Medical School, you probably think you're good enough. You guys would be stunned. How many people here feel insufficient and like imposters and like they need to be better? Because they're not chair of the department. They're not chief of the department. This person got a $5 million grant and I only got a $1 million grant. So if you think that good enough comes from an external source, you're just wrong. No matter what you do in life, it's not going to be satisfactory if you're looking externally for satisfaction. It's just not going to happen. Temporarily, maybe. But being good enough is not about anything you do out there. It's about what you feel in here. And that's not some like Oprah level BS. It's like actually true. Right? It's actually true. Like that's literally how our mind functions. That contentment really does come from within. And that learning to be detached from the outcomes of your actions and accepting yourself for who you are is like actually how you become content. Okay. What is Krusif's next step? So I think we talked about this. So I think he needs awareness of the processes that go on within his mind. So he's focusing on the last terminal thing. He's focusing on the outcome where he needs to really see these forces arise within him. Notice them, because once you notice them, then you get distance from them. And once you have distance from them, you can control them. That's how it works. It's like you become kind of a, it's simple, once you are aware of something, then you can start to exert influence over it, right? And when I work with people, they even say to me, oh, like I was sitting there and then I realized, oh, that's my anxiety again. There goes my anxiety. Silly anxiety. Why are you thinking that? Okay, that's just my anxiety. Okay, I don't have to listen to it. And once you're able to do that, it's not that the anxiety actually goes away. It's just like you're like, oh, that's my anxiety. And there are some days that the anxiety is so loud that you have to listen to it. And there are some days, most days, as you meditate and you get better and you learn yourself, that you'll learn how to control it. So awareness is the next step. How do you advise shaking anxiety? Okay. Oh man, I wish I had caught this question. So Krusif, why did you give up on YouTube content? You just need to keep doing it. If the content is good, you can work on promoting that work. So I hope Krusif gets this. Let me just see if I can. I'll DM him later. That's a good thought. Thank you for sending that. So how much meditation do I need to do before I see legitimate changes? A month, a year? So I'd say 2 months. So the clinical studies on meditation tend to show, like I'm just simplifying, right? So there are like hundreds or thousands of studies on meditation. Here's my general conclusion for people who want a simple answer. The studies on meditation, whether you're looking at arthritis, anxiety, IBS, all kinds of different stuff, blood pressure, show that to get a clinical improvement in symptoms that is statistically significant, you need to practice for 20 minutes at least 3 times a week, if not 5 times a week, for 8 weeks. So the goal that you should shoot for is 20 minutes of practice 5 days a week for 8 weeks to see a clinically significant benefit. Now, practically, so a clinically significant benefit over the course of a trial is different from like individual change, right? So a lot of times I'll see changes with people like over the course of minutes. So when you meditate here on stream, how do you feel at the end of that? Like that's pretty cool. So generally speaking, I think over the course of 8 weeks is what it takes to start to see neuroplasticity and change in your general level of function. Not just the post-meditative state, but like the way that you feel all day. So if you take people with anxiety and they rank their anxiety as a 7 out of 10, and they meditate for 8 weeks, it like drops down to a 4. So 8 weeks, 20 minutes a day. Okay. Can you explain the elitist mindset and how to overcome it? So the elitist mindset is ego, right? Like it's everything that I've been talking about. It's ego. If you think you're better than another human being, that's ego. Now, you can be better at certain things, but like if you derive solace or a sense of identity out of you being better than other people, that's ego. So just notice it. Notice that you're elitist. Notice that you have these thoughts and try to figure out where these thoughts come from. The other question about the elitist mindset is what triggers it. So this is also huge. When I'm talking about noticing the patterns of ego is triggered by things, usually by negative emotion. So the more negative emotion you're dealing with, the more egotistical you're going to become. So the more that you feel hurt or ashamed, or that someone else is like better than you, the more egotistical you're going to become. And so the root of ego is actually negative emotion, most of the time. At least in this scenario. So I think everything that I've talked about ego is like the elitist mindset. I think those go hand in hand. So someone says, I have a friend who I suspect may be going through the same thing Krusif has been going through. How could I address it for my friend? So 2 things, right? So I think you could get professional help. And you can also have him watch the video because like that's why we do videos, right? And by the way, I just got one of my mods just said that we got some donations. Oh, wow. So Obligatory Ham, thank you very much for the $100 donation. Stoltmeister for $10. And then Anksa for $5. BM Davis for $50. Mike for $100. And Defender Shay for $20. Wow, guys, thank you so much. Like, that's amazing. And Clarence, $20. Kalisal, wow, $11. Some guy, $5. And the subs, that's awesome. Yeah, calm down, guys. I'm not here to earn money. I really do appreciate the donations. They help fuel the things that we're trying to do, which I'll talk about in a second. Let me just finish this question. Okay. Okay, so, you can tell them to watch it because that's why we do it, and hopefully they'll understand something, and then they can go see a therapist. And if you want to help them, you can also watch what we do, and you guys can watch my videos. You can start doing what I'm doing. You can also sign up to be a recovery coach once again, or you can become a clinician. But if you want to help someone, those are my options. The whole reason that we did the coaching thing is because a lot of people are like, hey, I'd like to help. And I was like, okay, so you can go become a therapist, or, you can become a psychologist. And they're like, yeah, but I want to help like sooner than 6 years from now. So then I scratched my head and I was like, okay, there are a bunch of people that need help. There are a bunch of people that want to help. Can we put that together in some way and actually train people who can help? I don't know, but we're going to try. So that's something you can do. Okay. Last question. And then we need to figure out who we okay. Box. Okay. So last question is going to be, okay, is being disinterested when seeing success a form of ego? Is being disinterested when you see success a form of ego? No, I don't think so. It depends on what you mean by disinterest. So there is detachment from success, which is the opposite of ego. That is Vairagya. Vairagya is detachment from the outcomes of your actions. Vairagya is awesome. That's the goal. Vairagya is to be able to do your best and then leave the result up to, traditionally they say God, but, let go of the result. So Vairagya is to say, I'm going to study as hard as I can, and if I get an A, fantastic. If I fail, that's fine too. That I'm going to study as hard as I can, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And the result is going to be what it's going to be. If that's what you're doing, that's fantastic. If you see someone else's success and you don't feel happy about it, that could be different, because you may actually be saying like, oh, I'm not interested in that, out of a very subtle ego. There may be a subtle form of jealousy that you kind of like turn into disinterest when you see success. Like, oh, I don't care about that. Like, that guy did something amazing. Like, oh, that's cool. He could have done nothing. Would make no difference. So that is, those are different things. It just depends on subtly like what's going on in your mind. It's a good question, because it's a subtle difference, but very important one, right? So are you detached? Because Vairagya has nothing to do with other people. It all has to do with like expectation and letting go of expectation yourself and just devoting yourself to the action as opposed to the result.